Hello, Greater Metro Plymouth. Welcome to the first episode of Writers on the Storm. Our first guest is Liz All. She's a poet and a professor of English at Plymouth State University. And Liz has a new book that's just out or just about to come out. It still has that new car smell, beating the bounds. And it's a great collection. And after I talked to Liz a little bit about writing, she's going to read to us from Beating the Bounds. And also, Liz will be doing a reading at the Pease Library Monday, October 30th. Mm-hmm. What time is that?
7 o'clock in the evening, and there should be some light refreshments as well.
Great. Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And I thought maybe we could just first talk a little bit about how you write, like your general process. Do you write every day? Do you make yourself write? Can you make yourself write? Do you try to write every day?
I mean, I write things on paper every day, but no, I don't actually make myself write every day most of the time. In the summer and in the winter break, sometimes I will sign up, commit myself to a 30-day marathon where I will write a new poem every day for 30 days, which is this crazy breakneck pace. I felt really insecure about, I worried when I was much younger that I wasn't a real writer if I didn't write every day. But I got over that. And also I think like maybe if you're working on a novel, you have to write every day just to not fall out of it. And I knew novelists. It was Chuck Plunkett actually in graduate school who got me feeling really insecure about my work ethic because he was like a machine. But I don't write every day. But I do, sometimes I will make myself write every day for a short stretch.
And I do worry about people that write every day because they may not be in the mood, they may not be inspired, and I wonder, I can't make myself write. I try to, and if I haven't written in a while, I'll revise. I'll find something, an idea that I had before and just play with it and see if I have a new perspective on it. And are there times, so being a teacher, you have a lot of time in the summer to write, and so you may try to make yourself write more then. But what do you do with writer's block? You know that you have a big time period that you need to write, but you're not coming out with anything new. How do you deal with that?
We were just talking about this in creative writing class, actually, and I think I don't actually believe in writer's block. I don't think writer's block means you can't write or you're blocked from writing. I think writer's block for me is when the internal editor is on like full volume, and it's not that I can't write anything; it's that I won't let myself write anything crappy. I don't know if I can say that on TV.
We can bleep. We can censor.
Oh, that would be really exciting to be bleeped. So I think what I tell myself is like, don't be afraid to write junk. You have to write a certain amount of junk. That's part of the deal. And when I think about forcing myself to write, a lot of times, the only way I can do it, the only way I could get through those 30 days is like give myself permission to write crummy poems. And as long as I can talk myself into that, I can do it. And I'll write a bunch of crummy poems. But some days I'll write some good poems.
And then the danger then is if 99% of what you write ends up being crummy poetry.
I think that might be true anyway.
Yeah.
So you have to write a lot. Or I do anyway. I don't know.
So maybe one of the things that the benefits of that is even if you don't write every day, you have to be open so that when you get a new idea, when you get excited, you're ready to go with it. And so even if it's at 3 a.m. or while you're driving, you need to write something down.
And I think that writing every day thing can be, you can think of it like the way athletes run laps. Like if you and I are track and field enthusiasts and we like to watch races, we don't necessarily want to watch them train or like do their stretches and stuff. We only want to watch the race. And so like this is the race.
Okay.
And like 90% of the rest of it is, like stretching and like writing junk.
Although, if you have a favorite poet, and you get to see the notebooks. I mean,
Yeah.
there's like, if you're a writer, there's
Yeah.
nothing more exciting
So
than
cool.
you get to see Walt Whitman's notes or scribbles, or just recently there was a copy of a short story that Hemingway wrote when he was 9 years old.
I saw that.
I mean, that's exciting. But and then speaking of famous writers, do you have either famous writers or maybe newer writers that you read that you really look forward to reading that kind of inspire you and make you want to write, or help give you new ideas on types of poems, types of writing?
Robin Becker is a poet whose work I really admire. Cornelius Eady is a poet whose work I really admire. I subscribe to a lot of literary magazines. I feel like that's sort of how I tithe to the profession. Like, I kick in my share, and they stack up, like, all the magazine subscriptions, and so I'll spend time occasionally going through them, and I get a lot of I read poets whose work I am not familiar with before, and then I'll use a lot of that in creative writing class. And but there's a lot of really great stuff being written these days, and it's hard to keep up.
And do you get inspired by your students in creative writing?
I do. I try to write with them. So this semester I've written a couple of the assignments with them and gotten a couple poem drafts out of it. So I try to, and I always start out so promising, and then you get neck deep in the semester and it becomes less of a priority, unfortunately. But I think I've gotten good work out of writing with students. So
great. Yeah. And if you come up with a line, an image, you don't have a poem yet, you don't have a home for it. Do you just save that in a notebook, and then it can just sort of gel, and then eventually it's somewhere in the back of your mind, and you find a home for?
Yeah, that pretty well describes it. And actually right now we just, in the poetry class that I teach, went over a form of poem called a villanelle. It's a very formal poem. It's, I think, sonnet, but it's even harder to write than a sonnet. If you know the poem, "Do not go gentle into that good night," that's a villanelle. And so it's this very difficult form, but it's based on these 2 repeated lines. And I was sharing with my students that I had wanted to write something about the eclipse this summer. And in particular, I love the phrase path of totality. People were talking about the path of totality, right? That's a great phrase. But I didn't know what to do with it. And then later in the summer, the horrible, horrible hurricanes started hitting, and I'm watching weather forecasts, and this other phrase comes up, cone of uncertainty, which is that big, like, it could go here, it could go here, and so, like, there's this forecast, and here's the hurricane, and that there's this cone, and they call it the cone of uncertainty. And so now in one of my notebooks, I have many notebooks, I have those 2 phrases, cone of uncertainty, path of totality. And I'm kind of interested in the idea of, like, one of them you want to get far away from and the other one you want to get close to. And so that's that's kind of all I have so far, but I'm thinking about it.
Well, cone of uncertainty is great. It sounds like it would be a place in The Princess Bride, you know.
Right.
In speaking of hurricanes and eclipses, Beating the Bounds, your new book, you seem to write a lot about nature.
Yeah.
More than you used to. And one of the things that I noticed were there are a few poems in a row where you have descriptions of the moon that were really vivid, and I was just really able to see them. Once was the moon as like a smudge, and then the moon as a spotlight. So why don't we talk about the new book and how that all came together, and is the focus on nature more of having lived in this part of New Hampshire for long enough now that it's taken over your life?
Yes, I think so. I think, not unlike many poets, I write a lot about where I am, sort of physically, and then, like, metaphysically where I am, kind of metaphorically. And so this is a book that's both about kind of where I am physically and then kind of where I am in my life, age-wise, sort of settling down. And I do, a lot of it is about the natural world, and I used to be, that was a concern of mine for a while, because I I write about other things too, but when I moved here and then stayed here, there was this shift in my writing. And so I thought, rather than fret about it, just enjoy it, take advantage of it. And I I received a fellowship from a writer's colony called the Writer's Colony at Dairy Hollow in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, which is specifically for people who are writing about sort of the natural world. And I used that time down there to kind of focus on working on some of these poems. And then I had a couple of earlier chapbooks where some of the poems in this book were published previously in a much smaller edition. And it wasn't until, well, I'm not going to remember a date, but so I had all these poems and they were kind of about here, but I wasn't sure yet what sort of a thread would be for them. And I heard a story on New Hampshire Public Radio about beating the bounds. We don't really call it that here, but essentially we have law on the books in New Hampshire. If I may quote you New Hampshire statute right now, RSA 51-2, the lines between the towns in this state shall be perambulated, that just means walked, and the marks and bounds renewed once in every 7 years forever by the selectmen of the towns or by such persons as they shall in writing appoint for that purpose. So this story on NHPR was about how, well, this law is on the books. No one really does it anymore, except for these sort of hardcore enthusiasts who still like to do it kind of the old-fashioned way by walking the borders of the town, as opposed to using like GPS. And so this idea that you would have to walk the border of your town regularly to kind of reestablish, like, this is us, that's them, like, some, was interesting to me in a lot of different ways, both literally and then kind of metaphorically. As someone who grew up, my dad was in the Navy, we moved every few years, and sort of find myself here wasn't just to find myself in New Hampshire, but it was also to stop. Like, every other place I lived, except here in New Hampshire, I've been since 2001, I knew I was going to be leaving. And this is the first time it's not that I guess I know I'm staying now.
This is the first time you've had bounds to beat.
Exactly. So the beating the bounds, getting that poem written, helped me finish a couple others, helped me write a couple others, and kind of figure out the shape of the book.
And there's sort of a built-in tension with it that we walk the property as kind of a reassurance that we own this property. This is ours. It is nature. We are humans, but it is ours. And so that tension is there. It shows up in a lot of Robert Frost poetry, where everything becomes egocentric in nature. So this might be a good time then to have you read some of the poems from the new book.
Absolutely.
And you have some favorite children.
I do. So for me, moving to New Hampshire was also about moving to a rural place. This is the most rural place I've lived. And when you haven't lived in a rural place before, you have ideas about what it means to live in a rural place, that some of which are incorrect. And this is me thinking about that, but also using birds to sort of think of this idea. So this is called Country Birds. Two crows berate one another in the compost pile all morning, their salty counterpoint grating as a toothache. They hop and peck, slap their wings against decomposing melon rinds. The flicker knocks trial and error and trial against the rotting pine like a burglar jiggling a door latch. Looming above midnight's meadow, the owl swivels its great head, shines its wide lighthouse eyes against the doomed mice. Don't come to the country expecting only murmur and caress. Don't cave in to faint notions of what's natural and good. Don't tender your resignation to the masters of glass and steel until you've heard for yourself the cowbird sing its liquid lullaby while pushing the songbird's eggs from the hijacked nest, or seen what the dumb chickens will do to one another in jerky, reptilian moves with their busy beaks. Maybe the pigeons' soot-soft plumage is actually beautiful. Maybe their coos are music. Perhaps the city gulls, though they've never touched or even spied the sea, carry enough of what you're looking for with their sharp white wings. And you can just jump in.
That's a great poem, and it's
questions.
interesting that you bring in the city gulls. City nature.
Yeah. No, there's nature's everywhere.
But it fights more in the city.
I don't know though. Like I feel like nature's brutal. Like the country is kind of brutal. Cowbirds
That's right.
are mean. Like
My friend
chickens
Steve
are scary.
was the lead singer of a punk rock band, and he had a song called "Nature Wants You Dead."
Right. Yeah.
But we accept that.
We do. This one you'd asked after and mentioned with the moon poems. This is inspired by a piece of artwork by Liz D'Amico, who used to teach in the art department in Plymouth. This is called Full Moon Walk. The full moon spills a river of milk that I follow through the laden evergreens. Crisp tree shadows are thrown across this dead-end road like storm-felled limbs, but the storm isn't due till morning. The crunch and squeak of my boots through snow and the occasional tick of a branch on a branch are the only answers to the cloudy breaths I push out. The moon's spotlight paints the side of a barn, and the barn glows like a drive-in movie, while my long shadow trudges across its screen. Hours from now, the town plow will growl around these curves, searching for new places to push new snow. The neighborhood dogs will make their early morning rounds. Until then, they snore on their flannel beds. Until then, the old snow. No house light, no street light, only this jagged illumination, this midnight, this whitewash, this call you out moon.
Nice. Thanks for reading that. That's a
Sure.
great one. And that's, if you need inspiration, the moon is usually there on a clear night. And every time you get a good image of the moon, it's demanding that you be a poet, even if you haven't been a poet yet. It puts you in that mood.
Especially, was it just last night? Was that a full moon? That was a crazy moon.
It was so close.
I call that a car wreck moon because I'm always like staring at it when I should be driving.
Okay.
This one's
Public
called-
service. Don't stare at the moon when you
Don't
drive.
stare at the moon while you drive. It will hypnotize you. This poem is set at Crystal Springs, at the town spring here in Plymouth. Black flies. So thick today at the town spring's brimming concrete basin. It's as if they've pollinated the air with themselves, and I breathe them in through my nose and mouth, and they latch on at my wrists and ankles, on my cheeks, behind my ears, even though I'm dancing away from them as fast as I can, as if there were an away I could dance to. What must I look like here at the edge of Route 3, at the curve where the shoulder widens to accommodate spring traffic? What might my exertions mean to the southbound flatlanders who zoom past a twitching, hand-flapping high priestess of the roadside, stopping between convulsions only to swap out the filled plastic jugs with the empties?
Nice. That's a great sensation too. The black flies taking over, and it just always reminds me of the end of On the Road, one of my favorite novels. When Sal Paradise gets overwhelmed with the bugs, and then he just lets himself go and lets the bugs just take over. But Crystal Springs is a great place because you meet all sorts of different. I wrote a story about meeting somebody there. It's just.
I think somebody needs to, if they haven't yet, document the town springs of New Hampshire because you know they're going fast. And there's little they're all over the area here, but many of them aren't in use.
Right. But people come to Crystal Springs from other states.
That's good water.
So we should maybe just try to come up with a chapbook, a collection of poetry and stories about people at Crystal Springs.
I think it's a great idea. One more?
One or two?
Okay. I'll read two more then. This one, as I tell my students, really, you can write a poem about anything. You can be inspired by anything. You never know. And this was inspired by having a wisdom tooth extracted. Extraction. At Main Street Dental, by the way. Extraction. A crackling deep inside my ear. Another tug, and I feel the slow scrape of resistance, the friction, but not the pain, of substantial roots sliding against bone that wants only to hold them a little while longer, that only ever knew how to hold, whose only job was that holding. My whole body, even the distant, unrelated toe, clenches against this extraction. My aging body, which still holds onto appendix, tonsils, and, after 10 minutes of labor, just 3 wisdom teeth. At home, I'll ice my face and nurse a sturdy clot where the tooth once clung and chewed. The Novocaine numb will be replaced with ache, and my poor tongue will spend weeks unconsciously searching the new gap for what was taken. You get used to it eventually, that space where part of your body once lived and did its part. And of course, this is just the beginning of loss. Hair, bone density, memory, just the beginning of the slow or speedy pillage. Not all of it like this, mere minutes in the fluorescent office, smiles audible beneath masks, instruments bright and obvious, pamphlet of aftercare instructions. So I'm grateful today for this tidy procedure, its lack of complications, the pocket of this particular loss modest and fillable.
Nice. But we don't want to end on a depressing poem.
No.
That almost sounds like it'd be a Roger Waters, Pink Floyd poem.
So on an upbeat note, except it'll also be a little bit of a sad note because they're pretty much done with corn at Longview now. So that's always a sad time of year for me.
But it'll probably come back again.
It will come back again, so you can look forward to it. So
there will always be corn.
Like I was like trying to get corn in the last minute. So the last corn I ate was I had 2 cobs of corn for breakfast. Not today, but not too long ago. This is called Waiting for Corn at Longview. Monday after work, 1st of August, the sweet corn just started selling Saturday, and as I pull into the gravel driveway, I see the sign. Sold out. Back soon with more. A man in an idling silver Jaguar Massachusetts plates asserts with a sharp look my way his place in the invisible line. It's like he's planted a lawn chair in his shoveled out parking space. Others arrive, see us waiting, and wordlessly join the queue. On the empty expanse of formica where the corn should be piled, the cat stalks flies. We're hungry for it, and we've been waiting longer than these 15 minutes. Since March, we've imagined the first tender ears, pale kernels, sweet bite and juice. And when it looked like mud season was done, it rained through most of May and June. I drove past these fields, slowing down, pining, drawn as if to the neighborhood of someone who broke my heart. When the pickup rumbles up from the field and finally backs up to the stand, we straighten up, crane our necks to see what's just been picked for us. We start calling out numbers, and the women, always women, behind the counter start bagging. This produce is the last labor piled between them and their dinner. It's what we, too, held up dinner for. Each golden kernel, the clean silk, pale green inner leaves, 1 minute in the boiling pot, the shine of butter, spray of pepper, fresh burst of everything worth waiting for.
Nice. That's great. That's a very timely poem. It's October,
Yeah.
so that's the time it is.
That's right.
So the book is called Beating the Bounds. You can get it at the campus bookstore, or you can get it online.
Yep.
And
We'll have it at the reading.
the reading is Monday, October 30th. And also there are the Plymouth State University Poets and Writers Open Mics once a month, Tuesday nights at Burrito Me, and you read there quite a bit. And thanks for being the first guest on Writers on the Storm.
My pleasure.
There will be more. We're not sure who yet, but if anyone knows Stephen King, you can have his people contact my people. We will be on again, and the name of the show is Writers on the Storm. My daughter came up with that. My idea, since I like the Grateful Dead a lot, was I Know You Writer, but I didn't think a lot of people would get that, so maybe that'll end up being the closing line. I know you, writer, gonna miss me when I'm gone. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.